I'm going to start off with kind of an odd question, so bear with me. Are you here? Are you here? So often, we are here in body but not in spirit. So often we come here and we have so many distractions, so many things going on in our hearts that we're not fully here. We leave our heart somewhere else. We leave our heart behind. So I ask again, are you here? God invites us. That's obvious. He's invited us to the feast. But at times we hesitate to come. At times we're reluctant to step away from our lives and follow. So I want to offer you an illustration of how important it is to listen and follow. My little sister Julie lives down south of Santa Rosa in California. Last Sunday night at about 11 o'clock, they were all in bed. She heard sirens outside and a bullhorn blaring. She couldn't tell what. But when she got to the window, she could see the glow of fire coming toward their house. And then she heard the call to evacuate. She grabbed her family, got in the car, and by the time she was backing out of her driveway, the flames were about a block away. When she got to the evacuation site, she was surrounded by neighbors and people from the Santa Rosa area who were all dressed in pajamas and sweats, underwear and robes. They were dressed in whatever they had at the moment they evacuated. They responded immediately to save their lives, but they could save very little else. They were in a pretty sad situation. And the volunteers there gave them some clothes, gave them some coats, gave them things to wear. But for the most part, that's all they were. They were there. They had survived. They heard the call and they came. Part of their heart was back at home, some of their homes burning, but they came. They were there. Now in today's gospel, Jesus is telling this parable about coming, about being called, about a response, a need to come, to be present, to come with your entire heart. The thing is, this is just one parable of 3 that he's been telling throughout these last few weeks. One parable of 3. Does anybody know where Jesus is at this moment? Do you remember from the previous weeks where he is at this moment? Gus, do you know? No, you just got your hand up. Okay. He's in Jerusalem. He's come to Jerusalem. He's overturned the tables. He's cleansed the temple. He's gathered his followers, and thousands are there for the Passover. He's just a few days away from the cross, a few days away from the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection. He's confronting the leaders of the people who are trying to trap him with questions that they think he cannot answer. They're trying to corner him. And so these parables are for them, for the elders and the chief priests. And each of these parables is trying to get them to wake up, to come and follow. But they refuse. So 2 weeks ago, he told the story of the 2 sons. One son who was called to the field and said, "No, Father, I will not go," but then goes. The other son who says, yes, Father, I will go," but then doesn't. And Jesus tells them that sinners and those people who are tax collectors and outcasts, they who said no have now said yes, and they have come to the feast. While people who claim to have said yes, they live their lives as a no. They've refused the feast. Last week he told the story of the vineyard and how the tenants refused to hand over the vineyard to the owner, to God. They wanted it for themselves. And so the owner will hand it over to new tenants. And the chief priests and scribes, the elders of the people, are increasingly angry because they know Jesus is talking about them. He's talking about them. They refuse to come to the feast. They refuse. So in today's story, today's parable, now we have a king, and the king is calling them to a wedding feast. And as Father Jerry said, it's fulfilling the story of Isaiah. Isaiah, who promises that on the mountain, Jerusalem, on God's holy mountain, there will be a rich feast of choice meats and wine. This choice feast of a future of peace. They can't hear. They refuse to hear. The sinners and tax collectors and the followers of Jesus who've come together from the streets, the bad and the good, as it says, the bad and the good, they have heard the call, and they have evacuated their lives, and they've headed to the shelter of the Good Shepherd, Jesus the Lord. And the abundance that he promises is not necessarily just an abundance of food. It's an abundance of love, an absolute abundance of love. And he is calling them and us to that feast. He's calling us all to the feast, however we are, whatever we're dressed as. You see, we can come dressed up or dressed down. It's not about your clothes. It's not about your clothes. It's about your heart. In that reading, that person who came without the wedding garment wasn't about what they were wearing. It was about what's inside their heart. Do you know what we call these things that we wear up here? We call them vestments. Vestments. When we are invested in our faith, when we are invested in our faith, we are here. We're here. Our heart included. We are here because the call has come to us, and the table is set, and the feast is prepared, and the abundance of God's love is poured out. It's poured out. And because it has been poured out for us, we are able to share in the feast of heaven and earth at the table of plenty. We come here each week fully invested. So I'm going to ask you again, are you here? Are you here today? Did you bring your heart along? Did you bring your spirit along? Are you invested? Are you invested in the love of God that calls us to new life? As Father said, that calls us to hope, that calls us to reach back into the past and look forward to the future in this present moment with our hearts filled with gladness. To the Good Shepherd and the verdant pasture and the restful waters. Are you invested? Did you come and bring your heart with you today? Are you here? My sister's doing well. Strangely enough, her house survived, and she's now housing 2 other families who are staying with her because their houses did not. She made a choice. She made a run for it. She ran to a place of salvation. Like her, we run here. We come to this place of salvation. We invest our lives in our faith, our hope, and our love because God has invested those in us as well when He died upon the cross. Come to the feast of heaven and earth. Come to the table of plenty. God will provide all that you need here at this table of plenty. God bless.